thank you so much for being with us this afternoon or this evening, depending on your time zone. I'm going to give some welcome and introductory remarks, and then I will be facilitating this evening's panel, and we will have a question and answer session at the end. So please keep in mind some questions that you'd like to ask the panelists as they're speaking. You were muted as you came in, but if you have a question that you are burning to ask and you're not comfortable with the chat, you can feel free to unmute yourself to ask it. But also we have the chat, so you can feel free to put your questions in there as people are talking. My colleague Brennan is going to be monitoring the chat to find the questions as we go along. And we are actually recording tonight's event. So if you are uncomfortable with having your image in our recording, then feel free to turn off your camera. Otherwise, love to see your beautiful face. I see that Tom has already done this, but I was about to suggest if you would like to introduce yourself in the chat, you can put your name, where you hail from, wherever that is for you, and what organization you may be a part of, or what is your role, what is your interest in coming here tonight. So looks like we have Tom Tresser from the Civic Lab in Chicago. Welcome, Tom. As I said, my name is Emily Seraphy-Cox. I work at the Peace Development Fund. Prior to working at the Peace Development Fund, I was a community organizer for 15 years, predominantly in Minneapolis and San Diego. And so I was drawn to work at the Peace Development Fund in large part because of its commitment to supporting the work of grassroots community organizations in doing power building in their communities, and being led by the people most impacted by the issues that they face. So that is what compelled me to come to Peace Development Fund. I see that we have a couple of other folks who have introduced themselves in the chat. So Peggy or Reggie, sorry, Reggie. Oh, Reggie was on our call on Tuesday. Yay. Welcome, Reggie. Reggie is from CTDSA, Connecticut Police Reform Project. Welcome. And Brennan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. It's great to see you all. My name's Brennan Tierney. I work at the Peace Development Fund doing communications, and I'm based in Northampton, Massachusetts.
And Delia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Delia Kovac. I am a foundation officer at the Peace Development Fund, and I'll be supporting tonight by timing.
Fabulous. We also have Tammy Fournier Alasada. No, Alasada. I don't think I said that right, Tammy. I see her. I tried to unmute.
Alsada.
Alsada, thank you. My dyslexia comes out. From the People's Justice Project in Columbus, Ohio, one of our fiscally sponsored organizations. Welcome, Tammy. So Peace Development Fund, in addition to giving out grants, is also a fiscal sponsor. And so Tammy's organization is fiscally sponsored by PDF. So glad to have you all here. So really, I mean, as you may understand from what I just said, the Peace Development Fund is more than a grant maker. Our model of philanthropy involves, yes, direct funding through grants, also partnerships built around mutual respect, sharing of resources, and transparency of planning and decision making. We endeavor to be a key go-to foundation on issues like peace, human justice, social justice, and environmental protection. We work to counterbalance dominant power structures by moving resources and sharing decision-making with activist groups and communities of all sorts. And of course, all of this is possible because of our donors. We are not an endowed foundation, so we raise all of our money every year. The community organizing grants are what I would call our flagship program. It is perhaps not the biggest part of our budget, but it is certainly one of the shiniest gems at our organization. Each year, actually, Peace Development Fund receives hundreds of proposals from grassroots community organizations seeking funding. And there's a careful interview and review process by which we select the organizations that are going to have a significant impact in their communities or in their social justice focus area. Also, we love to invest in organizations that are working on issues that are not yet recognized by more mainstream or even mainstream progressive funders. So our funding priorities are organizing to shift power, working to build a movement, dismantling oppression, and creating new structures. And I think as the panelists speak tonight, you will hear from them how each of them are embodying these four guiding principles for our funding. Also, oftentimes, because we are funding small and new organizations, we are oftentimes the first funder or the first national funder for an organization. And lots of organizations say that, yes, we gave them like $4,000 and that was great, but it was the fact that then that $4,000 enabled them to get the next 15 and the next 50 that really propelled them into their future. So this event that we are here to talk about tonight is a part of a mini series of town hall events that's intended to offer an opportunity for PDF's network to learn directly from several of our 2020 community organizing grantees about what kind of work is happening right now on the front lines of communities across the country. We know that no matter who is in the White House, historically marginalized communities have to continue their fight, their struggle for liberation and self-determination. So I'm sure that's part of what we will hear tonight as well. We envision that these events will be a chance to learn about organizing strategies on a range of issues, hear what some of the on-the-ground challenges are that are facing movements today, and have an opportunity to find out how people like each of us here can get more involved with social justice movements. This afternoon / evening's discussion will feature a panel of exemplary community organizers who are leading the organizations doing this grassroots work. This is actually the second in our mini series. We had an event on Tuesday with a different panel of amazing organizers, and you can view that event on our YouTube page. That's true, right, Brennan? Yes, great. As you are listening to the panelists, please think of questions that you have for each of them, or all of them. You can type them into the chat at any time, and Brennan is going to collect them for our Q&A period at the end. Because we have a short time together, Delia will be keeping us on time and may occasionally interject with a time check. So now, on to the reason that you all have come here today. I'm going to introduce each of our panelists, and then they're going to have some opening remarks, and then after that we'll have our question and answer period. So our first speaker is Emily Napier-Singletary, who is a co-director of Unchained, which is based in Syracuse, New York, and was founded in 2018. Their mission statement is that Unchained organizes and advocates to dismantle the carceral state and guarantee access to dynamic and culturally relevant education. We invest in people locked up by police and locked out of schools to build power and chart a path toward liberation by making racial and economic justice a reality. Emily.
Thank you, Emily. It's really great to be here, and thanks to all of you for joining tonight. I'm looking forward to the conversation between all of us. So as Emily said, we are an organization that is based in upstate New York. There is a New York outside of New York City that many people are not familiar with, but we do exist here in the rest of the state. And we do have problems with our criminal legal system and with racism and economic inequality, just as New York City and many other major cities across the country do. At Unchained, we are unique because we are co-led by myself and my husband, Derek Singletary. He's the other co-executive director of the organization, and he is currently incarcerated in New York State. He's serving a 20-year state prison sentence here. He's a little over halfway through that. And we lead the organization together with him organizing and mobilizing people to the extent that you can do that behind bars. And, you know, others of us working out here in the community to organize and mobilize formerly incarcerated people and loved ones who are supporting people through their interactions with the legal system. We are an abolitionist organization, so we are working towards a world without police and without prisons, and trying to reimagine a system of true justice and not the system of punishment that we have in place right now. Just to give people a brief idea of a couple of the campaigns that we're working on right now, we co-lead 2 statewide campaigns in New York. One of those is called the Less is More New York campaign. That's a campaign that would overhaul the way that parole functions in New York State. Right now, parole can reincarcerate people pretty much on a whim for anything, and New York State leads the country in doing that. We send more people back to prison for non-criminal technical violations of parole than any other state in the country. And it's what's driving our incarceration rate here in New York State is people who have actually not committed any new crime, but just have violated one of the myriad conditions of their parole, like breaking curfew or something like that. So we have a bill that we helped draft, and a lot of other organizing strategies around stopping parole from doing that. It would, you know, our campaign would basically eliminate that practice of parole sending people back to prison for non-criminal violations. And then another statewide campaign that we lead is to increase access to phones for incarcerated people so that they can stay in contact with their loved ones on the outside. And that's a campaign that's about making sure that incarcerated people can get to a phone to have daily contact with their loved ones, and also to make that communication free, because calls from jails and prisons cost money, and it's typically the loved ones on the outside who are having to pay for that.
1 minute.
Thanks, Delia. As you can imagine, the issue of parole violations and incarceration rates, and this issue of phone access and communication with loved ones on the outside, both of these issues are exacerbated and heightened during the COVID pandemic, right? So we've been doing a lot of sort of emergency response type stuff since the pandemic hit. And we were successful in pressuring the governor to release about 800 people across the state who were locked up on technical violations early in the pandemic. So we're proud of that victory, but we have just lots more work to do in terms of decarceration and improving the conditions in jails and prisons for the people who are still left behind. And I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Yay, right at the 5-minute mark. Our next panelist is Beatriz Maya. She is with La Conexión, which is based in Bowling Green, Ohio. It was founded in 2013 and was founded as a welcoming resource of unity, empowerment, and representation for the Latinx community in the broader Northwest Ohio area. We seek to empower the community for positive social change by establishing and nurturing links of solidarity, strengthening and promoting our identity, building power to address community issues, and building community capacity to develop engaged community members. Beatriz, please share with us.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, the other Emily, for your presentation. It's fantastic work. So La Conexión is a grassroots community-based organization, and our members are Latinx mainly, and also recent immigrants of any nationality. We work in a rural area, very rural, Northwest Ohio, so we don't have high concentrations of people, and we travel a lot of mileage. So two things sort of brought us together. One was the growing numbers in the Latinx population in Northwest Ohio over the last 10, 15, 20 years. Our community, according to even census data, grew 40% and actually helping offset population losses in the state of Ohio and actually all over the Midwest. This was a reality. But our community remained completely invisible, powerless, and marginalized, and suffering from a variety of issues. We had no voice, and definitely no place, no recognition, and no place at the table. The other issue that sort of brought the community together was a racial profiling issue involving local law enforcement agencies that stopped 2 vans carrying migrant farm workers for a simple traffic violation, then jump into interrogating people for immigration papers, and they ended up calling ICE and Border Patrol, and they even called the FBI on this to take away the workers. So that sort of galvanized the community into action. And so our main purpose when we started was actually building community power. That was it. You know, we wanted to be more visible. We wanted to claim a space, and we wanted to have a voice. So we wanted to build capacity to be able to address our issues, right? So we spent the first year with 0 resources, going home by home and door to door, and basically talking to people, just talking. and assessing needs and asking people, okay, this is the idea is of forming an organization to build more power. And what do you think about this? And what are your needs? And how do you think you yourself can contribute to the effort? So the needs were out there. So we quickly built membership. And through this conversation, we ended up focusing our work in two big areas. And one was capacity development for adults and for our youth. And a part of this is also immigrant integration activities that we do. And the other big area is social justice. Of course, our community has been criminalized by immigration laws. And that's a crucial issue for my community that we definitely need to remove, because otherwise, no matter how many labor rights you have, if you are criminalized by immigration laws, you are set, right?
1 minute.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So I was going to talk about our immigrant rights campaign. Basically, is based upon organizing the immigrant community as one component. The other component is building solidarity, because we are absolutely aware that we cannot do this alone. So we have been building solidarity structures to help us in the struggle. And the other component is policy change. So things like engaging with local law enforcement agencies to build awareness and an understanding that it's not a good idea to engage in immigration enforcement activities. So that's part of the policy or institutional changes that we have been doing. And I'm going to stop there for Thank you, Delia.
Thank you, Beatriz. Okay, our next speaker is Kamau Franklin with Community Movement Builders, which is based in Scottsdale, Georgia, but works in other communities across the country. It was founded in 2015 as a member collective of community residents and activists based in Atlanta's Pittsburgh neighborhood, creating sustainable Black communities via cooperative economic advancement and community organizing rooted in Black love and equity. Kamau, please share with us.
I will, and thank you guys for including me and for everybody's presentation. So one quick correction, the Scottsdale is our mailing address. So our actual work is done in the Pittsburgh community, which is in Southwest Atlanta, which is one of the last working class Black neighborhoods, poor working class Black neighborhoods left intact in Atlanta due to the issue of gentrification, which is one of the areas of work that we do. And I'll get into that in a second. So I would say we divide our work up into two areas. One is organizing at a community level. And then the second area is what was mentioned around sustainability work. So around the community organizing, we work right now currently in Atlanta in two areas. One is gentrification. The area that we're in is historically been, in fact, it was founded by freed folks who were enslaved in 1883. And those folks have been in this neighborhood since that time period as a sort of a working class, at one point a middle class, and then back to sort of a working class community. But folks have recently been sort of pushed out of that community through the Atlanta elite. That elite includes a Black political class and a white economic class, which has targeted this area for gentrification. So we've started a campaign that involves yard signs, petition drives, and on-the-ground organizing to try to halt and or stop this gentrification and to get the residents themselves, which many of our members are, to be the leading force in how development happens. The other area of organizing we do is around the issue of police brutality and misconduct. And so as folks know, earlier this year, probably around April, May, There was a new heightened movement around the issue of police brutality after a particular killing. Here in Atlanta, there was a brother named Rayshard Brooks who was killed at a Wendy's. And that also caused a sort of a second or third wave of protest. That was done within a mile of our community house. And so we've been part of an organizing campaign to turn that Wendy's, which was burnt down, into a community center, a peace center, and an organizing center for folks to make demands around the issue of police brutality, but also to provide needed services to the community. Along with that organizing campaign, we also do a cop watch and safety patrol in the Pittsburgh area, so that we can be a buffer group and an alternative to traditional policing, something that starts to put out to folks that there's another way for our community to have safety, and that whatever safety is provided to our community, the community itself should be in control. So, excuse me, we call for community control of policing, and we call for obviously defunding and reappliance of that money into community services. The other area of work we do is sustainable development, and that involves cooperatives. And so we want to create alternatives to sort of capitalist models of what development can look like. And so we've developed a list of cooperatives: an aquaponics cooperative, a CMOS cooperative, a security/cop watch cooperative, a food cooperative, and a kale chips cooperative. Our CMOS cooperative has just landed us into the community's cooperative supermarket here in Atlanta. So that's fantastic news for us. And we're starting to build out the hiring of folks who can become worker owners in that cooperative space. And so that's really important for us, because we think not only do we need to organize as a collective, but we also need to create alternative economic institutions that people can start to rely upon, and so that we can build economically and not depend on a capitalist model of development, which doesn't involve people from the neighborhoods. They only get told about that stuff after the fact, as opposed to being involved in the planning and the petitioning of how development needs to happen. And
1
so
minute.
that's, I'm wrapping up right now. So that's the the way in which we engage in terms of our community. As mentioned, we have several chapters: Detroit, Dallas, New Orleans, San Diego, and Memphis. But Atlanta is sort of our flagship chapter where we all got started. And again, we are happy to be amongst the organizations who were picked for this grant, and to find out more about those organizations, and hopefully to figure out how we can work together to stop sort of the oppression, the common oppression that we all suffer under the guise of a democratic system, which we really don't have. I'm done.
Thank you, Kamau. And just as a reminder to our audience that our question and answer period is coming up next after the next speaker. So please go ahead and pop your questions into that chat box. Okay, our next speaker is Lisa Castellanos from Taller Girasol, which is based in San Jose, California. It was founded in 2017. And is a multilingual, multiracial, and multicultural community arts and action project that merges popular and traditional arts with social justice and solidarity action. Through art events and social justice workshops and trainings, Taller Girasol creates spaces and moments for community, healing, and collective power. Lisa, please share with us.
Thank you so much. And I just want to, in advance, apologize for any grumpy puppy noises that you may hear in the background. Someone just woke up, perfect timing. So just that in advance. So pleasure to be here with everybody. And thank you, Emily, for that, that great introduction. Taller Girasol is a labor of love, but also an opportunity to, for me as a 25, in this kind of organize, as someone who has been organizing for 25 years, to merge really two powerful approaches to transformation and engagement in community. in Taller Girasol, we pre-COVID, right? Pre-COVID, there were, all these great programs that we had that lent themselves to studio art. We had an engagement Saludarte program to expose people to screen printing specifically as a popular art form that also was kind of like, I used to tell our volunteer youth who would support that it was the first Facebook, right? The multiples of images and messages that could be placed around the community and that could really solidify political social moments, right? And we have, we know that there are, from Emory Douglas with the Black Panthers to Malaquias Montoya in the 70s with farm workers, that these images persist even when people forget exactly what happened in those movements. We also had a Solidarte program where we have 5 solidarity partners, organizations throughout the country that we would produce graphics or artwork for them with youth as we were able to meet and to commune together in person. COVID has really changed that reality. But what hasn't changed is that in essence, Taller Girasol is in many ways a space where we can develop spade workers, what Ella Baker calls as spade workers. Folks may have heard this before, but it's basically the training of people who are dedicated to the development of their community, of each one teach one strategies and training people in organizing methods and discipline that may not be that exciting, right? May not merit that Facebook selfie when you're accompanying someone in their development and in their agency. But that is actually at the heart of our movement work, right? So on the face of it, Taller Girasol shows up to do artwork. Well, we used to when there were community events. And on the back end, engaging our volunteers as potential spade workers, right? And so this year, because of COVID, we actually had to shift our gears a bit. And from the spring and the summer, we engaged in a project called Las Colmenas, which is the beehives in Spanish. Basically engaging creatives and artists in exploring different approaches for mutual aid and support in our communities. We were able to create an online digital market where some artists were able to share some of the work and some digital offerings for folks for self-care and for connection. And what that opportunity allowed us to do was to identify 10 youth that actually participated in something I'm really excited that, actually we were able to get it off the ground despite COVID. And this is the Honoring Our Ancestors Family Conversations project that actually wrapped up on Day of the Dead. This project was
1 minute.
Creating a toolkit for young people to have conversations about the connection between the cultural aspect of honoring our ancestors during October, which in the Latinx community is the month of Dia de los Muertos, and the connection of our ancestors' struggles for a better life to the opportunity to vote. And so we were able to have 10 conversations, or the youth were able to have 10 conversations. They engaged their most immediate family. And then we were able to create like a digital PSA, I guess you could call it, on November 1st and 2nd. These are the youth that we've been working with through the summer that we're looking forward to engaging further and identifying those spade work opportunities for them as we move forward. And yeah, I think that's it. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to the questions. First, I have a question for Emily. How is organizing with currently incarcerated people different?
In basically every way. No, thank you for that. It's challenging in different ways. So, you know, there's the logistical challenges of it, and then there's also the, you know, sort of political safety challenges of it, because incarcerated people can face a lot of retaliation for political activism and organizing in prison. Derek, you know, my husband and co-director, he has spent time in solitary confinement, you know, repeatedly for various actions that he's taken in there. So it comes with risks. But, you know, our philosophy is that incarcerated people have their own agency, you know, and they need to be able to determine what risks they're comfortable with, and if they're comfortable taking risks, you know, it's not up to those of us on the outside or people in different circumstances to prevent them from doing that, you know, but we just have to be mindful of the retaliation that people can face. You know, and then logistically it's difficult. You know, it's difficult in normal times, and then even more difficult during COVID because prisons are locked down so much. And so the sort of normal day-to-day interactions that happen between people in jails and prisons are significantly restricted because people are essentially confined to their cells all day. But under normal circumstances, you know, there are opportunities for people to interact with each other in the prisons at rec or in various programs. And so, you know, a lot of our organizing happens the way it does out here. And I love that Lisa, you know, brought up the term spade work. I think it's one that we don't use enough anymore in organizing. And, you know, it's the conversations that they have with each other in the yard at rec about how none of them can get on the phone for enough time to call home, right? It's the conversations that they have in reception when they first come into the state prison system, about how so many of them are there on parole violations, right? And it's just those kinds of conversations that bring people into the work. And then, you know, building those relationships and building the bridges between people on the inside and people on the outside, you know, has its own challenges because communication is restricted and it's expensive. But, you know, we've been pretty intentional about building capacity into the organization to support phone calls, and there is a secure email system that people can use, but that costs money as well. You know, so we have to build that into our organizing work, you know, the financial support that people need to build those relationships between people inside and people outside. So yeah,
Great.
it's sort of a rambling way of answering the question.
Great, thank you, Emily. A question for Beatriz. When you are working to lobby local law enforcement, are they receptive to change?
No. No, actually, it took us several years, you know, to reach to have any impact. At the beginning, so for instance, when that incident happened that I was referring to you, the first thing we did is, well, we need to organize a community conversation, and we're going to bring legal services to tell us what are our rights, no? So we did that, and the local police, they were absolutely furious. And they went to the City Human Relations Commission to stop us from doing that community gathering. And so we were called, and the Human Relations Commission mediated the supposed to be dialogue, because they were actually shouting at us. And we remained absolutely calm and basically said, you know, we're going to move on with the program. I mean, we're not doing anything wrong here. So, so that was the beginning with the local police. And of course, we continue the dialogue. At the beginning, it was mediated by the Human Relations Commission, and then it was direct, and things began to change. In 2017, we got the city to pass a resolution proclaiming the city as welcoming for immigrants and diverse populations and against deportations. So that was a big breakthrough for us. And so at this point, the chief of police is actually helping us distributing a letter that we put together for all the other law enforcement agencies in Northwest Ohio, talking about non-engagement. What are the benefits of non-engaging with immigration and building trust with the Latinx and immigrant communities? And we are working in collaboration with him, distributing this material. So quite a big change right there.
Great, thank you. I have a question now for Kamau. Post-election and after the recent rebellions across the country, where do you see the movement to defund the police going? Where are the opportunities? Where are their opportunities?
I think that's an interesting question. I think at the national level, I don't think there's really any opportunity for reform. I think that not only the fact that the Senate will be very close in terms of whether or not it's Republican or Democratic controlled, but even more important, we have a moderate president who's rejected the idea of defunding, and moderate Democrats who also, for the most part, have rejected this idea, and they are firmly in control of the Democratic Party, as they always have been. And so there's chance for more lip service. There may be some things around the edges, but I think if there's any real reform, it's going to happen at a local level. But even at the local level, the prospects are that there could be some decent decreases in the budgets of the police, and some of that can go back into sort of community needs. However, that's different from a real structural change that suggests that policing will be different in Black and brown communities in particular, because that's not going to happen. If I think in my own estimation, you can't expect a state which has worked so hard to build up its oppressive forces to tear those down and to stop doing what it's been doing since it's sort of like its lifeblood. So there's not going to be structural change unless there's far more pressure. And even the protests that we had, in America, those protests happen, but they're the targets and the sort of the strength and the ability to continue them in a way that pushes an agenda that has not really taken place beyond the ability maybe to get some, like I said, some amount of resources taken out and to say, look, we've done some defunding. So we have to be careful about what's suggested in terms of what we can get. But in fact, in terms of an optimistic message, and I'll wrap up, what's optimistic is that so many people have come out into the streets, have started to participate in organizational apparatuses, are trying to figure out what real reform and or radical change looks like. And that's something that we can be optimistic about. And then we have to make sure that we don't go down the bad rabbit hole of just looking strictly at policy for moderate Democrats to win the day, because that's never going to happen.
Thank you, Kamal. I echo that, and I also would add to it that I'm seeing a new generation of leaders, and those people will go on to be in positions of power in a few decades. So I look forward to being an old lady and seeing that great work come to fruition. This is now a question for Lisa. How do you see the role of the arts in social justice movements today? And what are ways organizations can build arts-based work into their organizing?
That's a really great question. I would answer it this way. I would answer it that there is a real opportunity to engage artists and creatives to be more than just producers of artwork or of swag, you know, of paraphernalia, of posters, which, as I mentioned earlier, are very important artifacts of our social movements that we cling to now. You know, we hold on to those. The opportunity to see our community as whole people, as whole individuals who can be both an artist and also an activist or artivist, and even an organizer. And I separate the activist, you know, that activist identity from someone who is an organizer or a spade worker, right? A spade worker does the work and doesn't need a whole lot of attention. They're just tilling the soil. They're just doing what needs to be done. And so I think that we would really be serving our organizations and our movements by one, creating more space for folks to step up and be able to show all the facets of who they are, and to bring forward whatever offerings they have. That means expanding the opportunity for engagement. If, as you know, as someone who's worked in a lot of different capacities in different organizing campaigns and in various movements, you know, sometimes we're just single policy focused, right? Or we're single, like a particular like campaign driven, whether it's an electoral campaign or whether it's an issue campaign. And yeah, we need the creatives to, you know, make the banners and stuff, but we don't really engage them, right, in that process of imagining what it is we're saying that we want in the world. And I would venture to say that there are a lot of people in our constituencies and in our base who, you know, who are like secret artists, right, or secret artisans, and who tap into that creative self separate from their movement or organizing spaces. I think that, you know, as I'm a very active member of Mi Gente nationally, and Mi Gente approaches social change from against, with, and outside of the state apparatuses. And so allowing people to have just a variety of opportunities to plug in and to express themselves and to help that imagination, because otherwise, you know, then we kind of keep imagining the same old thing in a lot of ways. And so that's how I would answer that question.
That's so beautiful, Lisa. Thank you so much. I now want to offer the opportunity for our panelists to ask each other a question. So Emily, Kamal, Beatriz, Lisa, do any of you have questions for each other?
I have a question.
And then it looks like Beatriz might have a question too. Go ahead, Lisa.
Right. In social change work, we can often mark moments as being an eventful moment, or a trend, an indication of a trend, or significant shift, cultural, political, social shift. I would love to hear from anyone who's interested what you see this moment as, the crisis that we're in, and also how our communities are responding. Is it an event? Is it a trend? Or is it a shift, like a significant shift?
Anybody want to take that one? Emily, Kamal, Beatriz?
I don't mind starting.
Sure.
I think it's a trend. I think it's way too early to precisely think that it's a shift. I think, I'm counting myself in this. The left has a history of thinking, of calling the last 15 of zero downfalls of capitalism through events or issues or things like that. And I think although we are, in some trying times, as in having sort of prototype fascism potentially leaving or not leaving in the White House, I think the mass protests and so forth, and COVID, of course, I think capital's ability to sort of reorganize itself and keep itself in power has not necessarily changed to the degree that I think is needed for that some sort of radical shift. And I think that's indicated by who the opposing party put up and who was voted in, and the ability of that party to rally enough people around to sort of legitimize that as the sort of oppositional force, right? So within that reign, I think there's a lot more work for us to do in terms of how we reach our grassroots audiences, how we do political education, and how we start thinking about some alternatives and sort of fight back strategy against the state to make something less of a trend and more of a shift.
Great, thank you. We have 5 minutes left in our event. Beatriz, you had either a question or also feel free to respond to Lisa's question.
Yeah, I had to agree. Responding to that question quickly, I think the potential for substantial change is there, but there is a lot of work to do to sustain that change in particular. And I think the elections were really a surprise to many of us. No, I don't know if we were expecting what happened. Some of us were expecting a bigger change. So that's in answering that. But no, the question that I had, more of a question is for Kamau. Could you expand a little bit in your work related to co-ops and community development?
And also related to that, I heard you say Kale Chips Co-op, is that right?
Yes. So I guess really quickly, our cooperatives are micro enterprises. So, we, in terms of the sea moss, we import it, we bag it, we sell it online, and we've now taken it to stores to get it in stores. And so again, the supermarket that we're in actually currently buys approximately 48 bags of sea moss from us a week. And so we'll develop that into hiring somebody to do the bagging and so forth. And as that person stays with us, then that person can move from just a worker to a worker owner. And obviously they're going to be paid above minimum wage even at the start. So our idea is that if we can keep building a product like that, then we can develop sort of the alternative infrastructure that means workers own it, and then that the organization itself is part owner, and so it begins to gain resources and is not as dependent, let's say, on, even though we love the grants, on grants or foundation money, but on money that comes through other avenues. And so for us, it's both a way of changing the dynamics of ownership, some class consciousness around ownership, alternative ways to build resources, skill development, and then working closely with our community to make sure that those worker owners come from the very neighborhood that we situate ourselves in. And so it's a building process, but that's kind of like the developmental ideal of how this is supposed to transform itself in a number of years.
Thank you. Any other questions from our panelists? Okay, any additional questions from the audience? You can unmute yourself and ask. Reggie.
Reggie, see him. Yeah, I was wondering, how do you guys deal with, in regard to spade work, I was just reading about Ella Baker a little bit. I didn't know about that at all. How do you actually deal with like the more fruitless and stuff like that, because I currently am part of the Connecticut Police Reform Project, and it's more the established groups around here that are kind of against the shift in reallocating money from police to mental health services. So how do you actually deal with things like that when it's the established communities on the left that are the ones that are jamming you up, as opposed to opposition that would be just the establishment in general?
Great question. Who wants to take that? Emily? You don't have to. I just saw you come forward.
My reaction. No, because it's such a good question. And it's probably something we've all experienced. I don't know if I'm trying to think of like a specific example that I could put words to. But I mean, actually, I guess, you know, Reggie, I don't know if you've noticed this in Connecticut, but, you know, the like work that we've done in Syracuse in the past around policing issues, we've always had, you know, like well-intentioned people on the left show up to, you know, events, whatever it might be, and talk about sort of the more neoliberal establishment type reforms to policing, like body cameras, right? Rather than like, you know, so that's something that gives more resources to the police rather than defunding the police, right? And I noticed here in Syracuse, you know, post George Floyd's murder, that there was a real shift here in the way that even sort of those more establishment neoliberal type groups and people were talking about the issue. And, you know, we've had a lot of events with, you know, with other grassroots partners on the left here in Syracuse, and we haven't had those same kinds of comments pop up like they have in the past about more training for the police and body cameras for the police. And there has been a real shift in that narrative here. And, you know, I mean, I think some of that is a result of the national moment of things, but I have to believe that some of that is attributable to, you know, what we might call the spade work that some of our more grassroots organizations have been doing over the past several years here in a place that isn't thought of as, you know, the most progressive place in the state or in the country. So I think we're seeing those conversations start to bear fruit here. And, you know, I mean, I don't know that that answers your question, but I guess maybe I say it more as a like, you know, try not to get discouraged, keep doing that work because it will bear fruit eventually kind of message, if that's at all helpful.
Thank you, Emily. Anybody else want to react to that before we wrap up?
Oh, I just saw, sorry, Reggie, I just saw your comment in the chat, and we could have a whole conversation about the Syracuse NAACP as well. So yes, yes.
Okay, well, we are at the hour for our event. I really want to thank all of our panelists and all of you for attending this evening. It's been such a rich conversation. I was saying